Hello and welcome back to All for United, and it's Monday, so that means it's just another United transfer show. Now you might think that I'm sounding quite jolly in my voice, but it's quite a depressing day, I think, if you're a United fan. Obviously, for the past couple of weeks now, it's been pretty quiet on the transfer front where United are concerned, but I feel today a bit of extra depression kicked in a little, We're reading that Chelsea are obviously very close to signing the likes of Ben Chilwell, Kai Havertz, and Thiago Silva, so they're making big moves this window. We're looking at Arsenal, who look like they're finally going to get the Gabriel deal over the line, probably one of their top targets this summer. And the news with Liverpool and Thiago's not going away, and you feel that could get done in a matter of days, the way in which Liverpool seem to do their business quite efficiently. And in the meantime, it continues to be so quiet around Manchester United. But I'm joined by three wonderful guests today, and we're going to try and make the most and squeeze the most out of the transfer news that is surrounding United at the moment. So I'm delighted to say I'm joined by, first of all, my usual guest, co-host almost now. Hader, how you doing, mate?
I've been better, mate. But yeah, great to be talking some transfers with you again.
Yeah, exactly. Transfer, yeah. Well, we're going to try and, we've got a couple of stories we can pick up on, and obviously, news around it, surrounding other aspects of transfers at United that we're going to discuss today as well. Nitin, you're back with us today, mate. Glad to have you on. How you doing?
Not so great, to be honest, by the pace at which we are negotiating our transfers.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm asking everybody how they are, because I think my mood sort of reflects the general mood around United fans and the guys on here. James, are you feeling any happier, mate? Any more positive about life in terms of United transfers?
Well, not in terms of United. No, it's very hard to be happy at the minute, isn't it?
Yeah, no, incredibly frustrating time. So I just want to let's start off with we'll do an update on Jadon Sancho. Obviously, it's this deal, I don't think, is completely dead in the water yet, but the noises coming out now for a good couple of weeks are quite worrying. And indeed, obviously, in the last couple of days, the sort of reports in the media have been that United now might be ready to sort of postpone this deal until next summer, because they just don't feel like they can afford the £108 million up front that it'll cost for the transfer. But also, when the agent fees and player wages and contracts taken into consideration, they're looking at another £100 million on top of that, which I feel is a bit of an exaggeration. But, Hader, I'll come to you first of all. I mean, we'll talk about, obviously, the risks of it going to next summer. But first of all, if United don't do this summer, their top target, like when I said earlier, all the other teams are landing their top targets, it's going to be a disaster, isn't it?
Total and utter embarrassment. The reputation of the club, I know this is sounding maybe a bit too dramatic, but the reputation of the club will be severely hit because, like you said, Chelsea are signing Havertz, and it's all about this perception to teams around Europe that we are rebuilding, we are pushing forward, and not signing Sancho after being one, the only club involved, and two, being so vocal for about a year now about how we're going to sign him and or how the interest is there. It's catastrophic. But I think looking at the issue, I mean, like you know this already, I spoke to Phil Brown on my podcast, and what was very interesting is to actually get a background on United's money situation, because we all thought, perhaps the budget would be about £150 million, and then anything from sales, which, obviously if all that money is spent on Sancho, we would have to sell before we buy for others' targets. But it's interesting to note that looking at United's cash flow, they generate enough money to compete with the biggest spenders, and you're looking at the likes of Chelsea, Man City, the other big clubs around. But the problem is that there is a cash balance problem where United just don't have enough to put down up front, and that's what we're seeing with Jadon Sancho. That United finance a lot of their deals. We look at the Wan-Bissaka deal that was spread over two payments, so we paid half up front, and then we're paying half later on. And United's problem is they went and spent massively on Harry Maguire straight up. Clearly, the money from Bruno has come out of the summer budget, which is reports we actually heard at the time, but that's probably around £50 million. And United, people are talking about the interest on the payments, and obviously the debt's a problem, but United are more than comfortable to pay those. So that's not really something that's affecting us. But the The problem is there's that amount of serious waste that we've had on players that have not worked out or shouldn't have been bought. And there's many players. Look, the Glazers have spent. They spent, close to £1 billion or maybe just over on players, but they've spent it badly. And the issue now is you finally have a manager who hasn't actually wasted a penny, spent very well. You can argue pretty much all the players that he's brought in have actually been probably the best signings we've made in the last 7 years. But now there's not enough money to back him, and it's beggars belief. And if you ask the ownership, do they want to win the league? And I'm not a big Glazer fan. I've put out a few posts and threads over the last 3 or 4 days about the Glazers, and I want them out. But of course they want to win, but they don't want to invest what's needed to get there. And I've had a discussion with a lot of people, and now I spoke to you about this, Joe, but we all know that the hierarchy don't have the football acumen to buy smartly in the upcoming, for upcoming talent, for the biggest potential, sort of players out there. And they can't develop them into future stars. And you look at Alphonso Davies as an example. We were linked to him, and he's a player that United would have targeted in the past. Under Fergie, we scattered brilliantly. We bought all these brilliant young. You look at Ronaldo and other players, and we brought them in. They were young stars. We developed them, but that's all disappeared since he's left. And we're starting to improve that now. If you look at it, I know Kieran wrote a great article about our academy and how Nicky Butt is doing some really great stuff. We're buying some young, great talent, but the problem is, and we're going to go on it later, but that director of football is integral for this. And you look at Luis Campos at Lille, who's discovered so many incredible talents, and you look at Monchi at Sevilla, they discover gems and they develop them. And to win the league, if you're not going to buy it, like City and Chelsea, not saying United don't do that as well, because we have bought big, but if you're not going to go and buy the best talent out there, you have to be exceptional in every other department. And United are not exceptional in every department. The squad's way too thin. You could argue, I think Ollie's done a great job, but you could argue he isn't on Klopp's level or Pep's level. I think that's obvious to say. So you can't put it down to management. You can't say that the club, in terms of facilities as well, is the best at the moment out there. And United aren't exceptional in every department. That's the problem. And when it comes to buying, if clubs are asking for a lot of payments down up front, United just don't have the money to do that.
No. Most
of the players that we sell as well, we're selling them for pennies. And that's the problem. And look, for years we've done that. Robin Van Persie went for £2 million. The issue also stems from the fact we give massive contracts. But you look at Chelsea, the amount they generate from sales is absolutely phenomenal. Bakayoko is going to sign for AC Milan for £40 million. He was atrocious at Chelsea. And we just don't get a lot of money. And look, I like to look at it this way. Bayern Munich went and sold Tolisso or Coutinho. Well, I know he's not there, but, Barcelona went and sold Coutinho. They'd get their money back on him plus more. So the issue here is the fact that United have to sign Jadon Sancho this summer or next summer. All the other big teams will be in for him. We'll miss out. The problem is we can't afford it. So I was very confident about this, but not anymore. But you're looking at the issue now. United's finances are a mess.
Yeah. No, and it's interesting. You say, with player sales, for example, about letting players go for cheap. The one that always sticks out in my mind is Johnny Evans, for example. I remember we sold Johnny Evans, I think, for £6 million. This is just an example. And he had a season at West Brom where he was so good, he became a £20 million player. But that next summer, Man City were going to pay £20 million for him. Arsenal were interested in paying £20 million. Even United were looking at buying him back for more than what they sold him for, which is absolutely ridiculous. But also touching on what you said there about, it's not just in sort of player sales and player purchases and player retention where the club have failed. You've got to look at the managers that they've brought in as well, haven't they? Yeah. The managers that they've brought in, I'll come to you, James, in the past, like David Moyes, Van Gaal and Jose Mourinho are always going to want a particular type of player. And they spent so much money on sort of appeasing those managers to buy them their type of player that, like Hader says now, we don't seem to have the money to back a manager that finally gets how United should be playing.
Yeah, it's frustrating. We're sort of looking to come away from that Galacticos era that we went through under Van Gaal and Mourinho, definitely. And now we've got sort of a clear plan in a different direction. We've scrapped that Galacticos idea. It clearly wasn't working at all. Going for some young, homegrown talent, whether that'll work or not, it's worth a try. But yeah, it's just a shame he's having no success at all. It goes without saying Sancho would improve any team in the world, United especially, drastically. And the fact that there's that reluctance to pay what will realistically turn out to be a bargain for him in just over £100 million, it just seems weird. And yeah, I completely agree with Hader as well about how selling players seems to be a real issue for United. Like, one that sticks out for me was selling Raphael for less than £5 million. I think apart from Gary Neville, he's been United's best right back. Well, disregarding Aaron Wan-Bissaka, in the 20th century. I think to sell him when he was early 20s for just under £5 million, it's just shows the pure incompetence more than anything. So yeah, it just reeks of a board that's run by a banker rather than a football man.
Yeah, we've touched on that. And look, we did a mammoth show on I'm losing track of my days on Friday, didn't we? About the Glazers. So we could talk again about the Glazers. We probably will in the future. But I want to just bring it back to Jadon Sancho, Nathan, and this idea that obviously we could wait now until next year to do the deal. Apart from I know what I think, but what are the apparent dangers of us trying to think that we can lead this deal till next year and get it done?
First of all, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Because Jadon Sancho is a player whose value is only going to increase in a year's time. Because if he puts up the numbers that he has been putting up in Dortmund for the last 2 years, obviously his stake is going to get higher. And not for the fact that Euros are coming up next year. So if he goes to England, obviously he will go to travel with the England squad, and he will. I think so. We all expect him to do well there as well. So if you're looking at 120 million right now, obviously in a year's time, it would be 150 to 200 million. Around about what PSG paid for Mbappe. So it doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, it doesn't make it's really frustrating as a United fan you've got one of the generational talents. He could be the next big thing in world football. He's that good. Jadon Sancho, he's just 20. The fact that we have paid 80 million for Maguire, and we are, reluctant to pay 28 million more on one of the brightest young stars in world football. That's really frustrating. And Dortmund have the right to ask 120 million for him because we have spent, 80 million for Maguire. It wasn't a great deal for us. I mean, as a player, he would definitely improve us, but he was nowhere near the 80 million mark. So Dortmund would have probably looked at our past business, and they have every right to ask 108 million. And that is a bargain, I would say, because he's just 20. So waiting for next year is just not an option because now that all the other clubs are out of the race because of the pandemic might be. And next year you might see a Real Madrid or Barcelona along with the English clubs like Chelsea or Liverpool coming in the race to sign him. So I don't think we win that race, firstly. So, and if we are going to end the season, I mean, the transfer window like this without any signings, obviously we won't finish top 4 either. So will Jadon Sancho choose to come to Man United at that point in time without a club without Champions League football and a club? I mean, I'm not speaking negatively here, but that could be the case because we already have a thin squad and we already saw how after the first 11 our dip in quality is just massive. So going into long season, we with Champions League football, and if we get 1 or 2 players injured, that's a season for us. The season is gone for us basically. If Bruno Fernandes or Pogba gets injured, that's it. And
that's the ironic thing for me, isn't it? It's like all the talk this season was about if you're going to secure Sancho, you probably need to secure Champions League football to convince him to come. And the ironic thing is, if United leave it till next season, the chances are that with this squad or the players, whoever they'll purchase this summer, may not be good enough to get them top 4 next season. And then you have that situation where we thought we might have this year, where we might have to try and convince Sancho to come to United without Champions League football, which is crazy. I mean, another reason why United should be striking while the iron's hot this summer. You know what I mean? They've got Champions League football. They can give him everything he needs right now. Just pay the money. I'll come to you, James, again on this just quickly. I mean, Nathan said there the only way his valuation can go is up, and you tend to agree with that. Obviously, if he has another really good season at Dortmund, even though his contract will be the years on it will be coming down. If his performances are good, his value will go up. But actually, if he doesn't have such a great season, and obviously his contract is wearing down, his valuation will go down. And you've got to think, like Nathan said, that's going to bring a lot more teams to the negotiating table, isn't it?
Yeah, it's impossible for United to win if they leave it an extra year. The valuation goes up regardless because this is still a sort of coronavirus price for him. I think £100 million for a player coming off the season that he's had. When you look at it in terms of like the Dembele deal a couple of years ago, it is genuinely a bargain. So I think if he has the same sort of season again, you could be looking at you know, upwards of 150 million at least. And then, you know, if we can't afford him at 100 million, who says we can afford him at 150? And then you go the other way. He has a slightly poorer season. His valuation goes down. Everyone else is in for him. How do we convince a player who's not a United fan? How do we convince him to join us over, you know, some of Europe's actual elite, like Real Madrid and Barcelona and Liverpool, who are undoubtedly going to go in for him? So yeah, it's just that level of incompetence that sort of confuses me from the board, because how in their mind can it possibly make sense to leave it an extra year? There's just no possible way of you winning from that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, mate. And Hayder, coming back to you, a little bit tongue in cheek now, a little bit. We saw a couple of days ago, apparently Jadon Sancho's cousin posting an Instagram post suggesting that he's going to have to get behind the Red Devils now. I'm never sure about these posts. You know, you always get them every transfer, don't you? This idea that, you know, players start following teams that they've been linked with. I do think they like to play with us sometimes, to be fair, so I'm not going to get too carried away, but I wonder if we'd probably be better telling Ed to step aside on this one and seeing if Sancho's cousin can get it over the line, mate, especially from a PR point of view. But that's just a bit tongue-in-cheek, so that's a bit rhetorical. What I do want to ask you more seriously now, though, mate, is without making excuses for the club, where do you sit on this idea of United spending money during a pandemic like this? We're still well and truly in. And like I was saying earlier, off air and on camera, that this was a real opportunity for United to take advantage of this situation and be ruthless. How do you feel on this? Do you see the moral side, or do you think that's just a convenient excuse for the club?
Look, with football, we've all said this and everyone's thought this. The money's been going out of control. You've seen the salaries that people have been offering. I mean, just look at Ronaldo's salary, Messi's salary. We all know there's a problem with money in football. But at the end of the day, it's a product, right? People are consuming it. Who is someone to say that, oh, so-and-so should be paid that amount of money? It's what the market rate is. So for me, look, United spending big on a player shouldn't have anything to do with the pandemic. At the end of the day, the club, whatever we think of them, they've actually, you know, acted in a very, very, I think, classy way during the whole pandemic. The way that they've helped the community in Manchester, etc. I think the players, look at Rashford, they've been brilliant. So at the end of the day, what United do in the transfer market, nobody should ever criticize just because obviously there's a pandemic going on. So for me, look, when I'm looking at the clubs around Europe, and you look at Chelsea, I know they've had a transfer ban, but they're just getting on with their business. It should be business as usual. Not obviously we've got a pandemic, there are financial problems, but the mentality should be the same. Look, they've decided to play the season, so we played the season. It's still a business. It still needs to operate, you know, in a way that it has to operate. So we just move on and carry on with it. So that's what United need to do. They just need to get their business done as if it's any other summer. When it comes to Sancho, and I completely agree with James and Nitin that, look, the price of Sancho is a bargain considering the quality you're getting, the potential longevity, the commercial revenue from it, the branding, the number 7 shirt, etc. if he gets it. All of these things are a bonus for United. My honest opinion is that, look, United know that they are the only ones in for the player and they just want to drive the price down. It's the usual lowballing, and we've seen in the past that United will just put the money in. But I honestly can't tell you. Each week I'm going down percentage. I was 85% and I went down to 70%. I'm honestly, for me, it's about 50-50 whether it will happen. But going on to Sancho and obviously all these little hints and stuff. Look, there's been too many hints for it to be a coincidence. When you look at obviously his cousin, then you look at the barber as well. There's a barber that, you know, Sancho was in Manchester, I believe, the other day. There's just too many little hints there. I think that he wants to move, but he's not going to agitate for it. And United just need to just man up or do what they got to do and pay the money, get the players out, just start operating like a proper football club. Because pandemic or no pandemic, this is not the first time this has happened during a summer window. It happened last season. Obviously, we spent big. It's happened in Jose's second season or third season, going into his third season, sorry. So, look, pandemic or no pandemic, no excuse. Other clubs are doing their business. We need to do the same.
Yeah, no, totally. And like you say, it's just... it's bewildering, really, and we've touched on, obviously, how difficult it's been. We've touched on the Glaze on Friday. I just want to talk a little. I want to bring something up that came up on the Wall of Reds show that we did last night. Again, if you're watching today, guys, if you haven't had a chance to watch that show, James was on it last night. It was brilliant. We did a season review. But one of the questions that was put to me by Ben, the host, last night was this idea about United having a sporting director, director of football, whatever you want to call it, someone who is a football person at all levels and is sort of the go-between the manager and the board. I'll come to you first on this, Nathan. It's only when you get transfer windows like this one, and I remember the transfer window that Jose Mourinho had after he secured top four a few years ago. It's only in windows like this that it really does seem to reinforce the need for a director of football, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a nearly drama to switch the focus of the fans because of the lack of transfer activity, essentially. And if you were to hire a director of football, we would have done it years before, because Luis Campos, one of the best sporting directors in the world, he scouted the entire Monaco side that reached the semi-finals in 16-17, and you can see the talents coming out of Lille right now. So he openly admitted that I can help Man United. It was I think it was Jose wanted him as a sporting director at the club. Yeah. So we didn't take the chance, and we could still take it because he said Lille. He hasn't moved to a bigger club, but I don't see it happening because it's just the yearly ploy by the Man United board to shift the focus of the fans, due to the lack of transfer activity. So I don't. If you were to sign someone of that role or a sporting director or someone like that, we would have done it till now. I mean, we would have done it previously. So. Yeah. I don't see it happening, to be honest. And, if at all one comes, I don't see him having a power higher than Ed Woodward, because he would have the final say or what happens at the club. So I don't think he would be given the power either. So I don't think it's a viable. I mean, it is obviously a great option to have because all modern clubs have. Look at City, look at Liverpool. Michael Edwards is doing a fantastic job over there, bringing in all those players, and they have, won everything literally. So I don't think United would go that path. The main reason for that is Ed Woodward. He wants the complete power at the club, and obviously, the trust that Glazers have on him. He was the one who helped them the takeover. So the Glazers have a massive amount of trust on him. So I don't think, they would let someone in to, share their power or something like that.
No, I can agree with that. And this is a question that I've asked myself, would it make that much difference? Because this person would still have to go down the formal lines of communication that Ed Woodward does and Matt Judge maybe at the moment. So if you gave that position to someone, would it just be giving it them for position's sake, or would they actually make a difference now? But just say, for argument's sake, James, that United did want to bring in a sort of director of football this season. As far as I'm concerned, when I look around football at the moment, there's some obvious candidates out there. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. You just got to look as far as, RB Leipzig. They've hit the nail on the head with their, manager and director of football combination. It's obvious that they work so well together. They've clearly got the same idea, and they've clearly incorporated the ideas and philosophy of the club into their transfers. Look, they sign young, they develop, they sell for a profit, and that's how they seem to be working at the minute. I think it's just so obvious that it works. I don't see why we're doing it. There's that many options. Whether you'd be able to get them out of teams, I think there's quite a few that are what you'd call them free agents at the minute as well. It's just there's people there for the taking. It's just whether they'll take the opportunity or not, which is not looking likely.
Yeah, I mean, when it was put to me last night on Wall of Reds, I suggested that United looked at someone like Van der Sar is an obvious one for me. Ajax, last time I checked, Edwin was still an ambassador of Manchester United. So, and don't get me wrong, I know he's got a lot of feeling towards Ajax as well, his boyhood club, and where he made his break, and obviously, but he had some great times at United, and I do feel if United came to him with an attractive package, it would be something that he would jump at. But that's what the key, isn't it? An attractive package. United and the way it's run at the moment, you look at maybe a director of football looking into United thinking, is that an environment I want to work? Are these people that I want to work with? And I'm going to come to you on this, Ada, because I know you've done a bit of looking over the last couple of weeks at United's structure and United's hierarchy. And you know, we can see it as fans, and we've asked for it for a couple of seasons. But actually, if this breakthrough was to be made, and United were to get with the times and get a director of football, sporting director, whatever you want to call it, who's going to be the person in that club that's going to say, this is what we need and we're going to do it? Because the way I see it, Ed Wood was not going to want anybody coming in maybe challenging his authority and taking him on and off the field. And the Glazers are going to see it as another employee at the club that they're going to have to pay for. So who's got the, shall we say, cojones to say this is what the club needs?
Look, before we go into that, I think it's just having to analyze, you know, how football has changed from, you know, I suppose when Fergie and Wenger then to now. And what you're seeing nowadays, as both of the guys have said, look, direct football is a common part of any footballing structure nowadays. And if you want to be successful, you look at Man City, Liverpool, etc., even Bayern Munich, they all have a sporting director or a technical director in some way. And gone are the days where Fergie and Wenger would run the club, you know, with an iron fist, I suppose, where the manager was the supreme leader of the football club, and they would be directly involved, you know, in almost every aspect of the club. And United were behind the times. While other clubs were changing, we had the greatest manager of all time, who was running everything as if, you know, as if it was like a list of tasks to do, and he had total control of everything. And it was just due to his genius that United was still able to win while the Glazers were in charge. And I think what you're seeing now is that that football's moved on. Football departments are now not only just governed by the coach, but in some ways they're an entity. If you look at the way that football's changed, we've got analytics department, we've got sports science, we've got scouting's become its own department. They're no longer just governed just by one manager or coach. They're now, you know, they're now needing someone who's going to bridge the gap between the board and the business side and then the footballing side. And before, you'd have the coach manager team, then you'd have an executive like David Gill who'd manage the finances, then they'd work together on recruitment decisions. But obviously, football's moved on. This method's no longer successful, and the model is inadequate to serve, you know, the modern aspects of the game. And due to the fact that the dynamic usually in that relationship was built on strong kind of relationships, that's declining now, because simply the fact is that managers aren't at clubs long enough. You look at Gill and Fergie, David Dean and Wenger. When Dean left, Wenger struggled. And yeah. I dug up a few sort of statistics, but, you know, since 2012 and 2013, a manager on average has lasted in a job only 14 months. So clubs are just reluctant now to bestow so much transfer authority upon a position which is quite transient, isn't it? You're looking at a manager, he could be here, and then it's much easier to sack a manager than it is to sack, you know, a whole squad of players when a team's doing badly. I just think that in modern football, it's not sustainable anymore to have a manager who's in charge of all the plans, you know, the windows, because, you know, unfortunately what will happen is when a new manager comes in, half the squad is seen as a cost because the new manager wants something different. So I think when you're looking at United, for, you know, they had a manager for 26 years, and then, as you said earlier on in the podcast, 4 different managers have come in and all have different styles. There's that mishmash of styles. There's different values. None of them were the United values, right? United jumped from one extreme to another. They went to David Moyes, and this idea, I remember when Moyes got appointed, the day he got appointed, I said, nah, just because he's young, he's Scottish, he's cut from the same cloth. I hate that phrase, because you know what? He was managing an Everton side. He overachieved. I think he did well there, but the football was quite clear that it was anything but attacking football. And what you saw then is you jumped to Van Gaal, a possession-based sort of manager, did well in Ajax and Barcelona, probably passed it. The players there were not set up, geared towards that style of play. Then you sacked him, and you'd invested heavily for him, and you'd bought in Jose Mourinho, who was completely a different style again. Now we stumbled onto Solskjaer and finally returned to something which resembles that United DNA. And you're starting to see the structure again with the academy. I think Nicky Butt, if United want to actually not go out and spend big on a Henriquez or a Ralph Rangnick, Phil Mitchell, Paul Mitchell, not Phil Mitchell's from EastEnders, that's so dumb. Phil Mitchell, Andrea Berta, there's people out there. I love Campos, because as Nitin's right, Campos did say, if United need help, you know, I'm happy to go there. But it looks like Tottenham might go and get him because he's got a good relationship with Mourinho. There's quality out there, and the point is that Nicky Butt's done a great job, and Kieran, again, you know, he wrote that great article and sort of the impression that he's made. And if United want to bring someone in who understands that United DNA, then Nicky Butt pushing him further up would be an idea. But I think that's why direct football is so pivotal, because they set the structure of the club, the style of play, the types of players that are brought in, even the managers. And that's my point, that when managers are transient, United never invested in the structure when Sir Alex left. Arsenal actually did. When Wenger left, they brought in Sanlehi, they brought in Venkatesham, they brought in Edu, they had Mislintat. There was too many people there. But the point is, they had this idea that, you know what, the manager is just going to coach the side. Arteta's a coach. He doesn't manage the outside of what goes on the training pitch. Obviously, he agrees on players, but that's done from above. And United just never invested in it, and it just fell apart when Sir Alex left. And a manager needs to be brought in that aligns with the United style of play. If Oli leaves tomorrow, there should be a director of football that it should just be business as usual. New manager comes in, the next manager has to play the United way. And I think that's why United are so far behind the elite. And that's why I have anger towards the Glazers, because this is their club. They've neglected the investment in the infrastructure and the hierarchy of the club. We're light years behind our rivals. And I think when you look at who I like to look at is, I like to look at Mikhail Zorc from Dortmund. Well, obviously, you've heard his name a lot. And he said there was a book called Masters of Modern Soccer, and he outlined Dortmund's philosophy. And what was important is that he understands the region, right? The region is a working class region. So, it has to be daring. The football has to be attacking. The fans don't like it when the team plays essentially chess on the field, boring football. The philosophy provides guiding principles for the way the club functions. So that means that they appoint managers with similar philosophies. When Klopp left, they were looking at the likes of Tuchel, and people like Tuchel came in. Look at the way PSG played yesterday. They played great football. They were very unlucky to lose. And, there isn't a massive upheaval of players then, and they've got a phenomenal academy. United used to be, famous for their academy. They're starting to return to more of that, but it's going to take a few years for these players to develop and, for the fruition to reap those rewards. And what you're seeing now is that at Dortmund is they nurture young talent. The players that come through the youth team, they mimic the first team. It's the same philosophy, same style of play. So when they join the first team, it's easier to settle in. They can't compete for top players at big prices. Dortmund don't do that. It's not their strategy. No. So their model, they're not going to compete with City or Barcelona or Chelsea or Bayern Munich. But their model is to buy the best young talent around, develop them, and sell for huge prices. They just rinse and repeat it. Compare that to United. It's just, look, United don't want to spend big money. It's quite clear. Fine, then bring in Luis Campos from Lille. He'll identify these talents. He'll identify, the next Martial, the next Mbappe, next Mendy, the next Gabriel, for example. I'm not saying he's on that level, but he found these players. He'll find them. He'll develop them. And United will then have a conveyor belt of talent. And I think the problem is that it's just not sustainable what we're doing. And at the moment, you're seeing what's happening is that everyone's blaming Woodward. Woodward's a massive problem. He's not going to relinquish power. And that's a problem. But, this is a Glazers club. So they can easily say to Woodward, step aside, go and do commercial deals. But the guys are right. And, James and Tinton are right that even if a director of football has to come in, but even if they come in, Woodward will have the final say. And who wants to be there is just a figurehead or a name. So, for me, I look at it, a sporting director for United needs to have strong football acumen. He needs to be able to have the experience to build a club from bottom to the top. Because you know what? That is exactly what United need. The structure's non-existent. They also need to have business acumen. They need to understand what's a good deal and what's not. But United aren't going towards that style. But sorry, I went on a little rant there. But that's what United should be doing.
No, don't ever apologise, Hayden. It's a passion that we want on this transfer show, and we have to fill time at the moment. There's not a lot to talk about. And it's interesting that you mentioned some names out there, which will be really helpful to some fans, because, again, the director of football role is not something that's familiar with a lot of fans out there. So people names like Ralf Rangnick, he's obviously been at RB Leipzig over the last few seasons, and you can see obviously what they've gone on to achieve over the last few years. You mentioned, is it Paul Mitchell there? I don't want to say Phil. Or Grant, was it Grant or Phil or Paul? I'm not sure. You went
Paul Mitchell, yeah.
Paul Mitchell, yeah. No, so Paul, obviously, he was involved with Pochettino at Southampton, I think. And we know what great players Southampton identified during Pochettino's time there, and obviously followed Poch to Tottenham for a season, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, and again, obviously helped, Tottenham develop under Pochettino.
I believe he's at Leipzig now. That's where he is.
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah, I think he's gone to Leipzig. You also mentioned people like, I don't know whether you said Campos. Obviously, we've seen a massive improvement in Lille and the players that they've identified. There's people like Monkey, who is at Sevilla. I think he was at
Enriquez as well.
Yeah, Enriquez. So, some of these names, if you're not quite sure who they are or the impact they've had, look at the clubs that they work at, and you'll soon realise just what these people can do if they're used effectively. Now, we've got about 5 minutes left, guys, so I do want to end on some positive news. That there was an interview conducted by, I think, Sky in Italy and Mino Raiola yesterday. If I'm right, yeah, I think it was yesterday. And he seemed to confirm that Paul Pogba was going to stay at the club this summer, which I think we already knew anyway. We could, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out. I don't think Paul Pogba was going far this year because of the fees that United want. But he also seemed to suggest that they will start talking about a contract in the near future. And that is a massive shift from some of the previous interviews that Raiola's done around Pogba, I feel. James, I just want to come to you on this. I mean, are you like me? I don't want to fall into the trap of thinking that this is as good as a new signing if someone like Paul Pogba signs a new contract. You can see Hayder shaking his head there, but it would be a sign of it'd be a positive move for United, I think, wouldn't it, to keep one of their most valuable assets?
Yeah, I think that all depends on how he approaches the next couple of years as well. I think it's all well and good him signing the contract, but if he suddenly after a year comes out and says he wants to leave again, then you're back to square one. Yeah. I think it's like a new signing in the way that it's taken up a lot of our transfer funds by the looks of it. I think a lot of our budget was based on selling Pogba this year, a couple of months ago anyway. So I think looking at it from that perspective, the board will see it as a new signing. He's one of the best players in the world, so it's going to be great to have him sign a new contract, but it all just completely depends on him and his attitude, because we know how good he can be, but we also know at times he can be very frustrating and very temperamental. So I think that, the board will do anything to shift this in a PR way to make it seem like this was a better bit of business than going out and signing some reinforcements. But it is a positive. It's absolutely a positive, but it shouldn't be the only positive this summer.
No, exactly. And to be honest with you, again, we all know how good Paul Pogba can be on his day, but we know that obviously at times his commitment to the club has been questioned. And for that, to be fair, Nathan, I'll come to you. If we'd have been offered 150 million this summer, say at the start of the season or even midway through the season, I think United fans have got to a point where a lot of them probably would have maybe looked at taking that and using that money to improve other areas of the squad. So even though we see it as a positive him signing a new contract, this is a player I think that a lot of people would have probably been happy to sell if the money had been right.
Yeah, obviously 150 million for Pogba is definitely a high transfer fee to get, but seeing the recent investment, seeing our recent investments, I don't think we would use that money to spend it elsewhere. Where's the money we got for Lukaku? And we haven't properly bought a striker in, so I don't think they would invest that in first place. And it's selling Pogba is not a good idea, to be honest, because we won't get players of that quality on the market. It's very hard to find players of that stature and quality in the market. And if you were to replace him, it's very hard to replace him. Yes, he had his injury issues and all the circus going around him due to his agents and brothers. But on his day, he's a world-class player. And there are not many players in the world who can replace him. So if Pogba is staying, then there's definitely a huge positive for us. I wouldn't take any transfer fee, first of all, if Pogba is staying, because he's one of the top echelon midfielders in the world. So there aren't many who can replace him. And the fact that he's at United is a great addition to our squad, a bonus for us. So I wouldn't take their money, because Pogba is a different bracket. Just Barcelona wouldn't sell their Messi, would they? I'm not categorizing Pogba to that extent, but obviously Pogba, it is hard to find, the physique, the ball control he has, his passing range. It's very hard to find these a complete package, a midfielder. So Pogba is a complete package. He has got everything: the strength, physique, the passing range, his long range shots. He's a complete package. So on his day, he's a world beater. So I wouldn't take that money first of all, and I would keep Pogba at any cost.
Yeah, and interesting you say they're complete package, and you just wonder if United feel like he's a complete package both on and off the field as well, because let's not doubt the commercial aspect that someone like Paul Pogba brings to the football club, and there we are again, we've almost gone full circle. But Hader, I'm going to give you a quick opportunity just to comment on this. We're just going to wrap it up. You know, Paul Pogba, is he staying because he wants to wear the red of Manchester United, or do you feel that, dare I say it cynically, he's staying because actually there's nothing else out there for him at the moment? And like James said, if we get a year further down the line and all of a sudden teams can afford him, are we going to get the same saga surrounding Paul Pogba next season, or maybe in a couple of seasons' time?
I'm going to be cynical and look, if he had an option at Real Madrid or Juventus, he would have taken it 100%. Look, we've got to be completely honest. The whole Paul Pogba transfer, I think it was such a big statement when it happened. He was the one to lead United into that sort of new, I would say, that new United post-Fergie. And although his attitude hasn't always been the greatest, I suppose his commitment as well. I think Raiola won't speak unless his client will tell him to speak. I don't think Raiola speaks out of turn. Whatever Raiola was saying was coming through Pogba. But I think when you look at Man United's commitment also to Pogba, that's something that hasn't been there. He's a winner. He's won the World Cup. He wants to win trophies. He's in the prime of his career. And United have not sufficiently brought the right caliber of players in to support that promise that United are going to, he's going to spearhead United back to the top. So can you blame him for not wanting to be at a club which is languishing between 4th and 6th pretty much for the last, 7 years? So for me, look, I always think that if Paul Pogba was looking to sign a new contract, look, it's to protect his value. Depends if it's just a 1-year option, I believe we have that option to trigger a 1 year on his contract. Yeah. If it's longer, then I would suggest, or it would suggest to me that actually there are promises in there. When I mean that, are United going to actually buy players? I cannot see him signing just to pick up another pay packet. He doesn't strike me as that sort of player. And a lot of people seem to have this view of him that he's not committed to his football. I think he is, but I think he's just frustrated because he wants to win. He doesn't want to be competing for third on the top 4 on the last day of the season. He wants to be competing for a title. So look, I agree with what Nitin said, that when you look at the market, if we got, let's say, 150 for Paul Pogba, just an example, it's not going to happen. But what out there is actually better than him? De Bruyne is not available. And then you look over, perhaps, I don't know, at Saul from Atletico, good player, he'll need to settle. Milinkovic-Savic, wonderful player, would need to settle. So actually, it's not maybe the best move to shift him because what's out there isn't actually better than what we have. But look, I've thought about it a few times. If you sold him maybe for 150, you could go and get Sancho. You could bring in a Van der Beek or a Thiago, for example, and you could invest probably more in a left back as well with the fees that's coming in. So I'm not too sure. I just think that he's just triggering it because there's no other options. But what I've seen from him since the restart has been phenomenal. But I'd like to see him play further forward. 2/8 with Matic. I'd like to, because Pogba's wasted further back. But that's obviously a tactical issue for another time. But I'm happy with staying. I just want to see the same commitment that we've seen in the last 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Ada. And
Can I add a point?
Anything? Carry on.
Yeah, so we have to remember that Mino Raiola is an agent who likes shipping his players every year. He literally wants every agent fees to bulk up his pocket. If Pogba signs a new deal, it is not certain that he's going to stay here long term. That's the first thing we have to do. When Mino Raiola speaks, we have to take it with a pinch of salt because he likes to transfer his players all around, probably every year. So we have to take it with a pinch of salt.
I think that in that case, sorry, quickly, I think in that case, Raiola won't speak out. Look, he's the best in the business at what he does. Players love him. Why? Because he gets them great contracts, he gets them moves, but also Pogba's not the sort of person who's going to sit there and let Raiola speak for him. Raiola is going to speak when Pogba tells him to speak. That's the reality of it. He's staying because Pogba's told him that he's staying. He wanted to leave. The reason why Raiola is speaking is because Pogba wanted to leave. So I wouldn't look at it as Raiola's being a snake or anything. He's just great at his job. And look, we hate it because he's potentially taking one of the best midfielders in the world away from our club. But at the end of the day, Raiola's doing what's best for his client on behalf of his client.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think, interestingly, in that same article, in that same interview, he was asked about Erling Haaland because obviously he only just moved to Dortmund in January and there's been a lot of talk of him moving on this summer. He said he won't be moving this summer, but who knows next summer. So, yeah, there you go. Look, a player he's only just moved to Dortmund, and he's probably already looking at future options. We may be one of those clubs involved. But like I say, guys, that's all we've got time for today. I do just want to say quickly as well, Dean Henderson looks like he's close to signing a new long-term deal at United. That's great. It's going to provide good competition for United at United for the goalkeeping spot. I think I would be tempted to keep him at the club next season. And actually, if it doesn't go so well for Dave in the first few games, put him under genuine pressure there and see what Dean can do. Also, just so you don't give up hope and so you don't forget what a crazy transfer window this is, on the first show of this, back about 6 weeks ago, I think Hader said, had to talk about the prospect of United really looking at someone like Jeff Hendrick. It's just come up on my phone now as we're speaking that he signed a 4-year deal with Newcastle United. So there we go, guys. It's either the craziness of the transfer window or United have become that desperate now that we're linked to the same players as Newcastle United, with all due respect. But anyway, I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining me today. You've been brilliant as always. Thank you, Hader. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Definitely work with you again in the future. Cheers, mate. Thank you. If you're watching, guys, don't forget, subscribe to this brilliant channel. There's new content all the time. I mean, the Wall of Reds was an idea that came up last week, and we put it out on Sunday. There's so much going on this channel. Twamen's back tomorrow. Don't miss that. If you haven't seen the other episodes, they're all up on YouTube. We do a transfer show. It's probably going to be every Monday and Friday from here on in now till the season starts. So do join in, do get involved. Subscribe to the channel, like I say, give it a like, and watch out for us on all the other social media platforms. And we'll see you on Friday when we're hopefully going to be joined by a South American journalist to give us a lowdown on everything that's going on in South America. So until then, see you later, guys. Cheers.